Hi, welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce and I'll be your server today. Seriously, I'm glad that you're here. Several things to talk about. Starting with, we didn't have a show up last week, and I'm sorry we missed, but I'm not sorry for the reason. I was in Charlotte working on a film. More about that later, but that's why. So, last weekend, American Pharoah did successfully win the Belmont Stakes, becoming the first Triple Crown winner since affirmed in 1978, and he looked good doing it too. A couple of observations. His time for the mile and a half was respectable, 2:26 and 65 100ths, and in fact it reversed a recent trend. Secretariat owns the record 2:24 flat, and in 1973 when he set that, he won by 31 lengths. But since then, through 2009, only twice was the Belmont's winning time in excess of 2:30. But 4 out of the 5 next years, it did. It's largely because in America there aren't that many races that are that long, so the horses with good genes for distance are most often sold to Europeans, where longer races are still plentiful. Now, if you wanted to, you could Google and find an interesting video. It was assembled by the folks at the Wall Street Journal. It takes video from 1973 in Secretariat, runs it alongside this year's race with American Pharoah. And it is interesting to watch, but of course the outcome is known. With that record-shattering time, 2:24 flat, Big Red beats Pharoah by about 10 lengths or so. Okay, I spoke last show that we take a look at what I call BS polls. They appear most often on Facebook, but they're elsewhere too. They're silly. Click like or share. If you believe George W. Bush was a great president, or Ronald Reagan, or Barack Obama, it really doesn't matter which name you use. But in all of these, there is never an example to click or like something opposite. So then somebody gets a bajillion likes and they show everybody the statistic, and they claim to have discovered a groundswell of opinion. I know there are millions of Americans who believe Ronald Reagan was a great president. I know too that many other millions believe Bill Clinton was a great president. I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to, you could find several million who believe Richard Nixon was. And he resigned the presidency in utter disgrace. But we don't want to hear other arguments. It's a great failing of human beings that we haven't yet learned that we'd all benefit if we just listened more. If we just took the time to listen to the arguments the other side makes. Instead, if we're conservative, we tune into Fox News and we learn to hate Democrats and liberals, and we see how the real conservatives are great, and all that information makes us feel good because, see, they're saying exactly what I already believe, thinking, already what I know to be true, yeah. Or liberals tune into MSNBC and get belly scratched, figuratively speaking, and we see how the Republicans are lying about this or obstructing on that, and everything good that might actually help us build our country back to the land of opportunity, they're against. I've said it before today, it bears repeating, we will bring this country to ruin if we can't find a way through this shouting, I'm right, end of story. That's insanity. Well, I discovered a website I'd like you to check out. If you go there, you can find articles that show Rick Santorum is a hypocrite. I chose that at random. Or that Rick Perry really isn't very smart. Yeah, you can find articles like that. But you can also find articles that reveal any number of warts on Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. It's interesting. I think you should visit the website, whichever camp you usually side with. Because unless you're really so stuck in a non-thinking mode, you would have to consider that getting both sides of the story makes sense. So what is the website's name? Alternet.org. Not alternate as an alternate delegate, alternet.org. They have their own writers, but they also have links to writers from other publications like the Wall Street Journal or the Huffington Post. So give it a try. Last week I briefly talked about Walmart. By and large, I don't like them. Let me count the ways. On some future show I may actually delineate some of those ways, but anyway, I mentioned that they are the country's largest grocer, and that is true, but I like this. Soon to become the country's largest retailer of organic food is Costco. They get it. For the most part, they get it. They're still missing the boat by selling farmed salmon instead of fresh caught, and there is a difference. Farmed salmon are fed antibiotics. That's bad for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is the increase in antibiotic resistance. And farm-raised fish are given chemicals to make them grow bigger, stronger, and fast, and to make them more colorful. In fact, Australia and New Zealand have simply banned farm-raised salmon. But I'm hopeful that Costco will catch on, because I think they usually do try to do the right thing. And I say that because of this. And this story is now several years old. I heard or read it some years ago. Nevertheless, at the time I read that Costco's CEO, and this is a big successful company, the board was giving him a raise. His salary already at the time was like $1 million a year, and he said no. He said, I'm pretty well paid, $1 million a year, I don't need more. Let's use it to make the company better or to pay our employees a bit more. How refreshing is that? With regard to GMOs, I do think the tide is turning, just not maybe fast enough, but here's a great quote from Jerry Greenfield, one of the founders of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. We're hitting Capitol Hill to let lawmakers know that ultimately what's good for consumers is good for business. You'd think that would be obvious. We're not taking a world tour today, but in Denmark, rather than call glyphosate, that's the active ingredient in Roundup, a probable carcinogen, they went further and removed the word probable. Oh, and Sri Lanka has imposed a total ban. Now, if the tide hasn't yet reached your shoreline, go find out more. Go visit justlabelIt.org. Your lives, your children's lives, your grandchildren's lives literally depend on it. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came, and it stayed. For years, I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too. And remember, you can watch all previous episodes of tinyurl.com/The Bruce Channel at our Facebook page, The Bruce Channel, and you can write us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com. Okay, some quick hitters. I mentioned in our last show the Greensboro News and Record, and I acknowledge that newspapers still face troubled waters, and Simon & Garfunkel haven't offered any bridges lately, but the day after that show went live, the News and Record announced that because of softness in national advertising, they were eliminating 9 full-time jobs across several departments. As I said, I am rooting for newspapers, virtually all newspapers. But there was also good news. This just a week ago, maybe it's just a coincidence, we'll see, but last week on Sunday, the solution to the Sunday jumble appeared on a later page than the puzzle itself. If it stays that way, kudos. All right, back for a quickie about Walmart. Management announced that they would relax the dress code for their employees. To what? The dress code at Walmart already looks like casual Saturday at a college dorm. Okay, I mentioned earlier that I was away last week for some movie making, even beginning last fall. I started to mention the film I was in last year, Samka, and some folks have been asking me, so what's going on with this movie stuff? So here's what's going on with this movie stuff. If you have watched our shows from the beginning or regularly or even irregularly, if you happen to hit the right episodes, you know that music has been a large part of my life. I played piano as a kid. I learned to play a number of other instruments. I played in a band, played at hotels and weddings, and ultimately I fronted a touring Vegas-type show group. I also discovered I could write music, so I wrote some jingles, some pop songs, cut a record. It was played on a number of stations in several cities, and in one of them, Philadelphia, it was chosen as Pick Hit of the Week. Anyway, music was always beckoning me. Occasional forays into corporate America, yes, but music was my motivator. And I performed since forever. In the first grade, I sang at the front of the class just before school started. The teacher said, "Okay, Bing Crosby, go have a seat." I did magic shows when I was 8. But despite all that performing, I never, ever considered working in theater. Now, in nightclubs, I'd kibitz with the audience, I'd sing, tell jokes, I'd ad-lib, but I thought going on a stage and saying the same lines every night would have to be boring. I thought going on a stage and saying the same lines every night would have to be boring. But I was wrong. It was while working in television I saw a casting notice for Damn Yankees. And I thought, maybe. I'd had a fondness for that show. I liked baseball. And in 7th grade, I gave an oral book report on the year the Yankees lost the pennant. That's the book upon which the musical is based. I got an A on that book report, by the way. So I went to the audition, but I knew nothing about theater. I was completely naive. Certainly I knew I would be physically inappropriate for the lead, the home run hitting Joe Hardy. And they thought I was too inexperienced to play Applegate, but I was cast as Benny, the manager, who happens to have the best song from the show. You gotta have heart, miles and miles and miles of what we're doing. That's when I learned that working in theater is not boring. It is a different crowd every night, and each performance is unique. The atmosphere is always different. It's also working without a net. If I'm in a nightclub and I blew a lyric, I'd laugh and I'd make fun of myself. But in theater, what if you forget what you're supposed to say? Or worse, what if someone misses an entrance? What do? So it is electric, and it is without a net, and it is a rush. So then last year I saw a casting notice and auditioned for the film Samka. On the first day of shooting, I discovered that I can never again say, "I don't know what I want to do when I grow up," because I now know I will work as a film actor the rest of my life. When I played Arthur in Camelot, I thought if I could do that the rest of my life, I'd have died and gone to heaven. But realistically, after a few years, wouldn't that have grown old? Same lines every night? But film, a village elder, on to say a mad scientist, a doctor, a villain, a butcher, baker, candlestick maker. Now, I've always gotten bored easily, so this endless spectrum of roles just seems to have endless appeal. And the other thing is, it's impossible to age out of, as long as you can move and speak. So, in another 40 years, I'll be playing the grandfather of a doctor instead of the doctor. Well, last month I submitted for a supporting role as a golfer. The age wasn't defined. The 3 principals were defined as 20-somethings. And if truth be told, it's been a few years since I needed an ID, so I was very honored that the film's director and the film's writer thought enough of my work to rewrite one of the characters as someone who wouldn't need an ID to order a drink. But last week in Charlotte, I'm not playing a doctor, not a village elder, not even a candlestick maker. I played the mayor of a medium-sized city somewhere in the South. Now you listen to me, you got until exactly tomorrow to show me what you're made of, or I'll get you out of your office. You hear me? This is just too much fun. Now, I can't tell you too much about that film. I can tell you it's ripped from the headline stuff. You can learn more about it and see some behind-the-scenes pictures and maybe follow production schedules and like that. They do have a Facebook page. At Facebook, simply type in heterodox.hds. So, as I've said, you can help. If you live next door to Steven Spielberg, or maybe his housekeeper, talk up the Bruce channel. Oh, news from last week. 4 Leagues Media, the producers of Samka, announced that it's been accepted into the Long Island Film Festival. So if you're up that way a month from now, July 15th, by all means, take a look. And if you have friends or family there, encourage them to go. You can stop by the 4 Leagues Media Facebook page. They have a link there to opening or buying tickets. Hope that you'll go. Okay, speaking of movies, I saw one I enjoyed. I want to pass it on to you. About 2 weeks ago, I was noodling around looking for something to watch. I've seen all the House of Cards episodes. I'm caught up on Sherlock Holmes, waiting for the next season. Fully caught up on Downton Abbey. There are some movies that I can watch more than once. Godfather comes to mind, and there are a few others. But when it comes to something new, it very much depends on my mood and whether I want heavy or light entertainment. So I was looking over various lists. I found some Nicolas Cage movies that I hadn't seen, and I usually enjoyed his stuff. They aren't high art. Often they're quirky, but they're well enough done for the genre. So I read the synopses, and I focused on one called Next, and I decided to try it. The premise is there is a terrorist group, and the FBI knows it's out there, and they want his help because, in addition to being a stage magician, he is clairvoyant. Well, somewhat clairvoyant, only 2 minutes into the future. But the FBI thinks he can help. Now, that's all I'm going to tell you, except it also stars Julianne Moore, who just, earlier this year won an Oscar, and an actress whom I'd never seen before. She's been around, just I hadn't seen anything she was in, and that is Jessica Biel. Now, the movie was what I expected, a nice bit of escapism, reasonably well done, and I did enjoy it. And I also established is a better word. I established a new goal. I want to be in a picture with Jessica Biel. Anyway, may your upcoming week be the best one you've ever had.